What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my solo role-playing and wargaming channel. I'm the Lonely Dungeoneer, and this is session 2 of Let's Play Chainmail Solo. In the last session, we used the solo setting and world creation system from Mythic Magazine 38 to randomly generate a campaign setting for this series, and we called it Westmoor. This is a frontier setting where hard-working people struggle to survive in the name of industry and progress. It's a hardened land of outlaws, criminal gangs, and crews of adventurers that serve as the first line of defense against an organized uprising of kobolds. Some mysterious rumor of evil behind the northernmost frozen peaks that may or may not be the cause of water levels receding in the area. And this is, of course, in addition to the normal wild things that live in the wilderness of an original D&D campaign. So we're off to a pretty good start, and today the plan is to continue fleshing out, developing our world, filling the sandbox with sand, using ideas from Mythic Magazine number 33, an article called Open World Sandbox Solo Play, which gives a number of suggestions that aim to help a specific problem with solo play that I personally encounter, where maybe you have a good idea of your player character going into a solo campaign, but maybe you don't have a very good idea of the setting that they're existing and living in. And it all feels really nebulous and makes it challenging to actually visualize your character in the setting. And so with this approach, we start our campaign with preparation to fill the sandbox with sand, to create a more concrete setting for us to play in up front. And this is very different from how I usually approach my solo role-playing campaigns. For instance, I typically only have like half a gist of who my character actually is and no idea about a campaign setting or environment heading into a game, a solo role-playing campaign. And I usually generate and populate the world and the environment around me by posing a bunch of questions, fake questions to the Oracle, to Mythic. But sometimes I run into the roadblock of struggling to visualize and come up with expectations, so maybe this will be helpful. I don't know. I'm excited to experiment with it, and so the next step right now is to take our concept that we started in the last session and to start building on it with whatever questions that we have. We can maybe go down some early rabbit holes and ask the Oracle questions about the world. So I'm going to go ahead and start asking questions, and I'm going to be doing this using the Mythic GM Emulator, 2nd edition, and in this series I'm going to make use of fate checks. So you may have seen on my channel before using the fate chart to ask questions. So when you use the fate chart, you assign a question odds of likelihood on the left, and you compare that with the current chaos factor at the bottom to get a target number to roll under. So then we roll our D100. If we roll under the target number, it's a yes. If we roll above it, it's a no. If you roll high enough or low enough, you can also hit an exceptional yes or an exceptional no. And this is really cool. However, I've recently discovered that if you play with the fate check instead, you don't have to look at a table. And the main difference, at least according to the author, between using the fate chart and the fate check as far as results go, is that you have a slightly higher chance of an exceptional result if you use a fate check, which I'm totally fine with. I think exceptional results are interesting. So yeah, this is a little different because in this case, instead of rolling a D100, we're actually rolling 2d10 and summing the numbers together, okay? And so instead of rolling under a moving target number, in this case, we're always rolling under the same target number, and that is 11. Or actually, I should say, for a yes, we're rolling over 10. So we roll our 2d10, and if the result is 11 or higher, from 11 to 20, that is a yes. If our result is from 2 to 10, the result is a no. And actually, if we hit the range 2 to 4, this is going to be an exceptional no. And if we roll in the range 18 to 20, this is going to be an exceptional yes. So that's pretty straightforward, makes sense. Random events are covered by rolling doubles. So anytime we roll doubles that are equal to the chaos factor of less, so let's say we rolled a 10, which is a no, but we did it with a 5 and a 5, and our chaos factor was 5. Well, that would be doubles at or under the chaos factor, so we would trigger a random event. So cool, we still have random events when using the fate check. And then finally, thinking about how odds and the chaos factor come into play, they actually modify your roll. So you have the straight or the natural roll of your 2d10. This gets modified by the chaos factor and the odds. And I was wondering if memorizing this would be challenging, but it's actually not at all, because in either direction you go from 1 to 2 to 4 to 5. You just skip 3. It's 1 through 5 skipping 3. So you start with 50-50, which does not modify your roll at all. And then if you step up to likely, you're adding 1. And if you drop down to unlikely, you're subtracting 1, which is taking you one step closer either to a yes or no result, which makes sense. And then with the chaos factor, it's kind of the same thing. With a chaos factor of 5, this is a middle of the road chaos factor, so there's no modifier. And then as the chaos factor steps up, you start adding a positive modifier to your rolls, and as the chaos factor steps down, you start subtracting from your rolls, and it all works out really well. And the big perk for me is that you can resolve your questions more quickly. So I can get through more questions in a shorter amount of time. And when you have a limited or set time period for solo role-playing, this can actually be a huge benefit. And it feels really the same as using the fate chart. It just feels faster. So let's play in the sand. Let's fill our world with sand with some questions about the world. I want to know, does this world have a pantheon, right? Some kind of religious system. That's actually, that's probably certain. More specifically, I want to know if the people in this region believe in different gods, or if perhaps there are monotheistic religions in this area. I guess what I'll ask, let's see, which would be the more active? I think pantheons are usually more common in history. Monotheism is a little more rare, so we'll call that the active result. If you ever are trying to phrase a fate question and you're not sure which, like let's say you have a binary question like this between monotheism and like pantheism, right? In this case, you want to ask yourself, which is the more active result, and make that the yes if you can. If that's not straightforward, just kind of roll with it. It doesn't, at the end of the day, it'll all balance out. It doesn't really matter. But if you want to take the time to think about it, maybe make the more active result a yes. In this case, I think a monotheistic religion would be slightly more active just because it's a little more rare maybe than pantheism, and maybe it also could lead to issues. Monotheism, as you're probably aware, usually precludes belief in any other deities, while pantheism is usually more open and accepting of other deities. So yeah, I'll ask that question. I actually think it's unlikely, and I'll actually make it very unlikely that this region is more monotheistic. For filling the sandbox with sand, we're going to consider the chaos factor to be 5. This is actually what it'll start at when we actually kick off a first scene and start playing. But for all of these questions, since we're just generating lore and backstory up front, I'm going to consider the chaos factor to be at 5. So really, we're only going to be adding the odds modifier to our rolls, adding them together and seeing if they sum up to 11 or more. So I'll call it very unlikely, asking the Oracle the fate question, is the Westmoor region more monotheistic than pantheistic? Roll our 2d10 and we get, that is a 9 and a 6, 15. Minus 2 takes us down to 13, which is still a yes. Okay, so now we already know something. There is a single deity that, or at least there are single deity religions that exist in this region. Is it about the same religion across the region. I think this is nearly certain. If there's a monotheistic religion here, it doesn't seem very likely that there are competing monotheistic religions in this same region. So I'm gonna ask: is it all about the same religion? We're gonna say that's nearly certain. Roll our 2d10. We get 2 plus 1 is a 3, and even adding the 4 of nearly certain, 3 and 4 is 7. So that's a no. There are competing monotheistic religions here. Okay. 50-50. Are there more than 2 of them? Is that really 50-50? Are there more than 2 of these competing religions? Yeah, we'll call it 50-50 because it might be like 3. 6 and 2, that is a no. 8. So we'll say that there are 2. There are 2 largely competing. And actually, I should ask, are these 2 religions in direct competition with one another? I think this is, given historical precedent, this would be nearly certain. But for this region, do we want to explore religions in direct conflict across this frontier region or setting? I could just make it likely or very likely and give it a chance for these religions to kind of coexist and just flavor different cities in a different way. Yeah, so I'm just going to make this likely that these 2 major monotheistic religions are in competition with each other, and we'll leave it up to fate. Rolling, we get, with our 2d10, a 10 and a 1, that's an 11, plus 1 is 12, that is a yes. So these 2 religions are in competition with each other, and to me, that could mean either religious conversion, right? That's one way. Like, they could be evangelical, trying to win hearts and minds, so to speak. Or they could actually be resulting in open military kind of conflict. Now, this region is a highland region, and these settlements are maybe spread out, and they're really focused on industry, on survival. It seems unlikely to me that they would want to kill each other over their religions, given the setting, and given that these are not really expansionist kind of people. We already know these groups of people are really entrenched in where they are and in how they believe. So really, they're just really adamant about their own beliefs. And if you believe something different, they would like to convince you otherwise because they feel like they're the ones that are right. But at least for now, I don't see much of a motivation for them to be marching on each other in the name of religion. Yeah, I would say that that's probably not the case, but we can ask the Oracle, are the settlements in this region under 2 different monotheistic religions, are they in open martial conflict with one another because of the religion, or does that tend to happen? I'm going to say that it's not nearly impossible, it's just very unlikely. Okay, 2d10. We get, that was so close. That was almost a yes. A 6 and a 1 is a 7. Minus 2 for very unlikely is a 5. That is a no. Okay, so they are not in open combat, conflict with one another, but they will try to convert you and try to get you to see their side of things, try to believe their way, if given the opportunity. Okay, this is pretty cool. Why don't we ask about these religions? Why don't we roll? We have in Mythic Game Master Emulator 2nd Edition a number of meaning tables. And so I'll use the term discover meaning to mean that I'm going to roll for a pair of words on a meaning table. So if in this case, I'm going to discover meaning on the gods table, and that means I'm going to roll for 2 words, mash them together, interpret them, and this is going to give us our first god of our 2 monotheistic religions here in the area. We're going to get a sense of what the first god is about by discovering meaning on the god's meaning table. All right, so in this case, we're actually rolling D100. So the red is my tens place. We get a 94. That is war. Oh, okay, a god of war. And a god of 21, cosmic. A god of cosmic war. Very interesting. Okay, let's try to give our new god of cosmic war a name using the names table. And this table is a little different in that you don't just roll 2 words. You don't stop at 2 words. You actually roll for sounds until you're inspired by those sounds with a name. And this can be pretty loose. You don't have to actually incorporate every sound that you roll. It's really just supposed to trigger noises that might sound like a name. So we're going to roll for sounds on the names table until we come up with some name for our god of cosmic war. Okay, D100, first roll is a 23. That sound is EI, so A or E. 80. Etal. Oh, that's already Atal or Etal. I think Etal sounds cool. Okay, so Etal is our god of cosmic war. And I should actually ask, is this a god or a goddess? Okay. Yeah, why don't we make goddess the yes? So I'll roll, and the odds, I'll make it, let's see, god of war. I don't think it matters. I don't think that there's a leaning, I don't think that cosmic war leans either way. I think there could equally be a goddess of cosmic war. That would be pretty cool, actually. Why don't we roll with odds of 50-50? Let's make it a straight roll. 10 and 3 is 13, so yes, this is Etal, the goddess of cosmic war. Interesting, and this almost makes me think when I was first learning to play Dungeons & Dragons a long time ago. It was in the era of the 4th edition, and in that edition, the cosmology has something called the Astral Sea, where gods roam through the heavens, a very cosmic place. And so this makes me think of some deity representing some astral heaven above in a warlike manner. That is quite interesting. Okay, I'm going to make a note of this, and then now I think it would make sense to roll again on the gods table to come up with the other deity for a monotheistic religion. Okay, we're going to roll. First we get just a flat 6, a god of animals. Okay, 73. Animal military. What? Okay. Could this be the god of the orcs? Like the goblinoid deity? Interesting. Maybe the humanoid, like player character type ancestries in the region. Humans, elves, halflings, and dwarves are the primary playable player character ancestries in original Dungeons and Dragons. Maybe they follow Etal, and this other god is actually the god of the kobolds and goblins and orcs, anything goblinoid in Westmoor. This wouldn't make sense given our prior piece of context that these two religions don't promote open conflict with one another. But it might not be in the name of religion that they're fighting and competing. That could just be a cultural difference despite the war. Okay, yeah, I was originally thinking that these were going to be two religions tied to the playable ancestries. But it sounds to me like this is really a god of the more civilized ancestries versus a god of the goblinoid races. And if we think back to how Chainmail in original D&D work, They both operate under an alignment system, right? So in original D&D, we have the forces of law, the forces of chaos, and then we have neutral forces. And this is very much derivative of original D&D's wargaming roots in the game Chainmail, right? In Chainmail, we have very clearly defined opposing factions of large-scale armies doing battle with one another. The presumption is that they have reason enough to engage in mortal combat, right? And that is, I mean, that's a pretty serious point that you've reached where you're willing to fight and die against another group of individuals. So there's a lot of heavy implication there. And original D&D inherits this with the alignment system. So we might fit well into the implied setting by assigning Etal to law and assigning this other god or goddess of animal military to chaos and to represent the goblinoid races. I think that would be quite interesting, actually. Okay, why don't we roll for a name for this second deity? Our first sound, we get 100, a Z. Ooh, interesting. Okay, that's a cool roll. Next we get 31. That is fair. Fair. Zephyr. Zephyr? That's funny. Zephyr is like the name of a tool that people use in software development. Okay. And Zephyr, we could spell it like Zefyr. Zephyr. Is Zephyr a goddess? Let's roll for it. 2d10. 8. No. Zephyr is a god. Zephyr. Is that really Zephyr? Is that how we want to do this? Zeph. I don't know if E is the right sound to connect that. Yeah, I think maybe, actually, to make this a little different, I'll go with Zephyr. Zafar, like Jafar, but with a Z. Zafar, Zephyr. Okay, I like that Jafar is a villain, so it would be implied that Zafar is a villain. So we have Etal, goddess of cosmic war, and patron deity of the lawful in this region, while Zafar is the god of animal military. He's the god of goblins, the god of goblinoids. Yeah, the god of goblins. And Zafar is representing chaos in Westmoor. And I'm now equally excited because with the name Zafar, I play a lot of RuneScape, and in RuneScape you have the evil god Zamorak, right? Who also represents chaos in that universe. So that's kind of how I'm envisioning Zafar. And so in RuneScape we have this fun word, incredibly fun word, Zamorakian. And so in this campaign, we can now take Zafar and say, like, Zafarian. In situations like, oh, we heard rumors of a Zafarian cult forming in the wilderness. But actually, while we're on the topic of gods in RuneScape, I actually think that Zafar would most closely align with Bandos, who is a god of goblinoid races in RuneScape. And so, yeah, Zafar is basically Bandos, and Etal is a cosmic war goddess. Super interesting. Okay, well, so the sandbox is indeed being filled with sand. Now I actually have another question based on our world history path. So we know that there are rumors of some sinister evil behind the northern peaks, right? This is a pretty general statement. What I want to know is if there's any kind of visual indicator or difference that hints mysteriously at something having changed to imply this sinister evil. Is there anything visual about this. I'm going to ask, I'm going to make a fate check, and I'll ask, yeah, is there anything visual that's maybe scaring the citizens spread across Westmoor? We'll say that this is a raw 50-50. I have no idea. We get a 7 and a 6. That's a 13. That is a yes. There is something visually different about the northern mountains. So if we imagine whatever this hilly region looks like, perhaps as we move towards the north, we get more and more mountain ranges until finally there's some large, maybe scary mountain range in the distance that's maybe considered too wild for the humanoid races to go and populate, or for the I don't know exactly how to describe the player character races, for the forces of law. We'll just say for the lawful alignment faction to go and settle. And I used to live in Colorado and around the Denver area, and something that I noticed in living so close to such an epic mountain range, what I learned from that experience is that you basically learn to orient yourself to the mountains. So we always knew that the mountains were to the west, and no matter where you were, no matter what you were doing, if you were outside, you could, unless you were surrounded immediately by skyscrapers, you could look around you and see the mountains in one direction. And I imagine a similar experience for the citizens of Westmoor. No matter where they're at, if they're outside, they can always look up and see on the horizon the northern peaks. And now we know that there's some scary visual indicator that something is different and there's something missing going on beyond the mountains. And I want to know what that is, so I'm going to scroll down to our description meaning table. And yeah, I think I'm going to discover meaning on the descriptions table to describe what that visual difference might be. For our first word, we get 49. The difference, the visual difference, is something helpfully. 83. Rough. Helpfully rough. Okay, helpful. You look up to the mountains and you see something helpful. Is it new lights? Like, I'm imagining like the Aurora Borealis, like maybe northern lights, and then rough. So like not pretty and colorful, but I don't know, maybe there's some like deep red lights that glow in the night. Is it? We'll make a fate check. And if it's lights, okay, let's say that there is some strange northern light type of reaction that has never occurred in history but is occurring now. Some kind of lights in the sky are the only happening at night. I'm going to say that is nearly certain, because I think it would be difficult to see them during the day, but I don't know for sure, so we'll make a fate check. 4 plus 3 is 7. Nearly certain is going to add 4. That's going to bring our 7 to 11. That is a yes. So each night, as the sun goes down, a new band of, we'll say that they're red lights against the frosty peaks. They stand out starkly against the backdrop. Hint at some sinister evil beyond the mountains. And it's something visual and ever-present that the dwarves, the elves, the humans, the halflings of Westmoor can't just forget. And this is really cool. This is obviously an adventure seed for a higher level character. This kind of a threat is going to be beyond our pay grade as we start off the campaign, but I love the world having these little role-playing hooks in them that aren't prescriptive. They don't go out and define how things will turn out in the end. They don't actually give you the answer to what is, who's the man behind the curtain, what's going on behind the mountains. We don't know. We don't have that in advance. Our player is going to have to go and discover it, or the world is going to have to unfold in a way that reveals that information to us, which is really cool. Okay, that's pretty exciting. So far in the session, we've generated a religious overlay, right, for the region. We've learned a little more about the threat behind the mountains. I think it would be interesting now to create one location, maybe to create a settlement in the Westmoor region. And this might be the place where we begin our campaign. I'm not quite sure, but I'm going to turn to another resource. There's actually maybe a pair of resources. But we're going to start by diving into one of my new favorite resources, the Sandbox Generator. And what I've really been wanting to do recently, what my goal has been, is to get some kind of basic campaign setup, like in structure, for hex crawling down, right? Like I wanted to get some process down for coming up with a campaign setting, which I think the solo setting and world creation system is hitting, and the Sandbox article. I think those are hitting that well. And then for hex crawling across a world and exploring it, like not having a preconceived notion about the adventure that my character wants to go on. I think that's a problem that I've been having recently, where if I'm playing an adventure module that's like geared towards you accomplishing a certain task, I'm actually wanting a more free and open kind of experience. And in a true sandbox, the adventure hooks for those larger adventures are there, but you can choose to follow them or not, and accept the consequences, right? If you don't go and fight the evil bad guy, then obviously they continue existing and doing terrible things and maybe growing. But I really want to have that option to just kind of openly explore. And Mythic has the location crafter and the randomized location crafter that does a really excellent job of building a solo or building a campaign setting around you, not necessarily solo, but any particular dungeon, city, structure, anything like that. The location crafter does an excellent job. However, I really specifically wanted to use a tool that would give me that hex crawling feel to my campaign. And while the location crafter can certainly do that and do it well, I found the Sandbox Generator, and it seemed interesting because it is clearly exactly targeting what I'm looking for. You can use the Sandbox Generator to, from little to nothing, build an entire fantasy world. And it's, so far, I've used it. I've already used it a little bit in an offline campaign that I'm not recording. I've tried it a couple times, and in both cases, it's generated a very interesting kind of hex region to explore. And so I'm going to try incorporating that into this campaign, and just I'm just going to see how it goes. Now, something interesting is that the Sandbox Generator in its tables makes an assumption about the kind of area that you're trying to generate, but it actually encourages you to tweak these tables to suit your setting. So we're going to be following the Sandbox Generator's procedures, but the actual tables, we might tweak them, but we probably will tweak them to better suit our needs. And so if we get a rundown of what the Sandbox Generator actually includes, so we have hex map generation, where each hex on your map has a biome, right? Whether this is grassland, in our case, hilly regions, that kind of thing. And then you generate features on each biome. Your feature is essentially the interesting thing located on that hex. And there's quite a few, right? You can generate landmarks, settlements, lairs, and dungeons. And this book has generators for all of these things. So you can randomly generate the overall arching hex map and discover what is on each hex. You can do this in advance in preparation for a campaign, or you can do it as you go, which is my plan to keep things interesting. But as you go, it'll also generate the landmarks that you find in your region. It'll generate the settlements in pretty good detail, lairs and dungeons, all kinds of tools. You also have some fun things like tavern generation, NPC generation, houses. So there's a lot of good resources here. I think this is going to be a huge benefit to this campaign. And I guess getting back to what I was saying, my goal has been to get this procedure down and kind of have a standard way to play, because I have several old school role-playing games that I'd like to play. And I'd like to play it in the way that I want, in this sandbox kind of fashion. And while I do enjoy adventure modules, you can actually stick a lot of old school adventure modules in your own larger world. Yeah, so I guess that's another problem. I will start playing an adventure module, but I'm interested in the wider world too, and I want to just be able to leave the adventure and go do something else. Because I squirrel, I get off topic a lot, and you're going to find this as I'm talking and as I'm playing. This is going to happen again and again. But an adventure module on its own doesn't give me exactly what I'm looking for. So I hope that this process, we'll refine it as we go, but I'm hoping that the process where it's at right now is going to be enough for me to really test out different role-playing systems given the same kind of gameplay. I have original Dungeons & Dragons, Swords and Wizardry, I have basic D&D, Blueholme, Beyond Dragons. There are several OSR RPGs that I would really love to play in this style. And so, yeah, the plan here is to experiment with the process and to try to make it feel like what I'm going for. So the next step for this campaign, for me, I think, is to generate one of these settlements, so we can start to imagine at least one of them, right, and have that as a place in our mind. And if we jump into biomes, right, and actually, really, it's features. There's this optional rule that you can follow for a traditional campaign, where the first, in a traditional campaign, you first go into a dungeon and then you explore the wilderness at higher levels. And the reason for this is that, like original D&D assumes that you're going to start by playing in the dungeon. They kind of assume that your dungeon master has prepared a dungeon for you to start exploring. And as you survive coming back from the dungeon and your character levels up, then they start to learn more about the wider world and go explore. So the wilderness is very dangerous in original D&D and in a lot of old school role-playing systems. So to give yourself a good setup, you can optionally have the first hex always contain a village and the second one always contain a dungeon. And I think that's going to be the procedure that I follow to make this easier for us. And so what we really need to do is to generate a village. And usually you would start by rolling for a biome, but we already know that we're either in the hills or the mountains, and it's way more likely that this village is located in the hills than inside the mountains. I guess we can leave it up to fate. I'll ask, is this starting village located in a mountain range or pressed up against a mountain range. I'm going to say this is... It's not really nearly impossible, is it? That's not how I would describe it. It's very unlikely. Okay, we'll roll for it. We get a 7 and a 5. That is a 12. And then very unlikely takes 2 away. That lowers it to a 10. So that's a no. Wow, but we were only 1 away from that being a yes. That's quite interesting. So our first hex will be a hills hex, right? And then the first feature, again, rather than rolling for the feature, we're going to assume that it's a settlement and that it's a village. So this game, the Sandbox Generator, distinguishes between hamlets, villages, and cities based on the rough size and population. So yeah, cities are obviously huge or large. Hamlets, I think it says that a hamlet maybe contains like 40-ish to 50-ish people. Maybe a village has 150 to 200, and cities can have, you know, well over 1,000, maybe into the thousands. This is all modeled off of medieval Europe. We can adjust these things as is interesting. It's just a cool starting point. Okay, so we're going to generate a village using the Sandbox Generator's rules, settlement creation rules. Note here, this is just me kind of squirreling. There are 3 kinds of civilian settlements: hamlets, villages, and cities, but you also have 3 class-related settlements. These are castles, towers, and abbeys. And this is really cool because in high-level play in original D&D, your characters can actually build a castle or a tower or an abbey. Like, that's built into the context of your character's class. And so as we're exploring, it's something that I don't know why, but I haven't really thought of when I'm playing od&d before. The world might be covered with examples of other adventurers having formed their own castles, towers, and abbeys. So we'll come across these, and they hold powerful fighters, wizards, and clerics. So that I think it's going to be really cool. Anyway, we're going to move on to the hamlet. So the first thing we need to do is come up with a name for our village, and we can randomly generate the name, and if we don't like it, we can toss it. But so far so good. These have been fun. The names that the Sandbox Generator is coming up with have been cool. And again, we don't have to blindly follow this. We can always substitute anything that we find interesting along the way. This is really supposed to spark our imagination and make it easier for our creativity to flow, rather than to restrict us. And that's the same thing for Mythic, right? It's the same thing. Okay, so we actually need to roll a d30, which means we need a d6, and I don't have one out here. So let's go to Objects, Components. I'm going to go to Dice, get a plastic d6 out here. I'll color it teal for fun, just to keep a visual vibe going. Okay, so we're going to roll a d6. 1 or 2 will be a 1, 2 and 3, or 3 and 4 will be 2, 5 and 6 will be a 3. And the d6 roll is going to give us whether we are rolling on the first 10, the second 10, or the third 10. And our d10 is going to index into those final 10 slots. Okay, rolling these two for a kind of name. 3 means we're in the middle 10, so that would be 15, right? If we're starting from 11, yeah. So 15, D less Banes. D le Banes. Okay, so I just had to do some Googling to understand what le Banes means. Apparently it means the baths, and it implies the presence of a local spa, or maybe in our case it could be a hot spring. And D means we're going to roll on table D for a word to go there. So an example name that can be generated from this roll is Wark le Banes. Interesting. Okay, why don't we go and roll on table D then? This is city names, and it is a D24. So we have the D6 for our 3. Now we also need a D8. So I'll pull out a D8. Yep. Right here, we'll make it teal again. And we'll roll the D6 and the D8 to get our city name. So that is from 1 to 8. We're going from 9 to 16, the 6th slot. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nisme-le-Bains. Ooh, Nisme. So Nisme-le-Bains is a village in Westmoor. And we can assume that there's some kind of hot spring that bubbles up into the town. We can make that assumption just based on the name. So now we want to roll for a series of things related to a village using the Sandbox Generator. This is going to help to flesh out our location. So this says, unlike hamlets, which rarely exceed 20 inhabitants, villages are settlements with an average of 100 souls. Cool. Okay, so we're going to roll. We're going to start by rolling for a size. Okay. And this is going to give us an approximate population for the village, and we'll use the size in further rolls. So I'm going to roll a d6, and we roll a 5. So this is a small village. Okay, so the settlement size is 1, and we can use our village size of small to find the approximate population of the village. It says to multiply the size by 50 people, so there's only around 50 people in this very small, very, very small village, Nisme-le-Bains. Okay, so next we have an occupations table, and this says that farming and cattle breeding are just going to happen around a village. Farms, crop fields, and meadows can thus be found. Now we're in the hills, right? We're in the hills, so our fields, we don't really have meadows. We'd rather have like small terraced farms, right, with very intentional places for agriculture, maybe in valleys between hills. So it just, we definitely can get agricultural, but it's just not the same as having large flatlands. It's a little different, and you have all these isolated little places, which allows for maybe lots of independent farmers to all be working their own kind of farm in agricultural business, right? Okay, so, but now in addition to the given agricultural focus of any small community, we're going to roll a 1d6 to see if the villagers have an additional occupation. If the result is 1, we'll get to determine what that extra occupation is. Okay, so there's a 5 and 6 chance that there's no additional occupation. It's just a farming type village. Okay, let's roll, and we get a 2, so no additional occupation. This is farmland and livestock only. Okay, now we're going to roll for a layout. Oh, this is pretty cool. We're going to roll 1d3, use the d6 to make that happen, to determine whether we have a heap layout, a round, or a row. This is cool. Okay, rolling, we get a 5, so we're going to have a row layout. So we can kind of envision our 50 people lining along one main road, right, that has maybe roads branching off from side to side here. But maybe it lies along a larger road, which would make sense given the context of Westmoor. Maybe you have these long paths that run through multiple settlements back to the normal world and off towards the mountains and deeper settlements. Okay, that's pretty cool. All right, so I've noted all of that. Now we have points of interest. So in general, every village has at least one of the following locations: a blacksmith, a market, a tavern, and a well. Okay, so that's good to know. So we do have some basic points of interest here. But then we also get access to special locations in this village. It says roll a d20 as many times as the village size to determine the special locations of a village. So we're going to get a d20 out this time. Okay. Once again, we'll change the color for fun. Okay, and this is going to give us some special location in our village, and that's pretty cool. Okay, we'll roll it. We get a 5, a butcher. Okay, so I'm going to note we have a blacksmith, a market, a tavern, a well, and a butcher. And this is, of course, in addition to a hot spring that we know is present at Nisme-les-Bains. Okay, so now we're going to roll for defenses. Roll 1d8 as many times as the village size to determine what defensive features the village has. Reroll any duplicates. We have a size of 1, so there's only one defensive feature of our village, of our row layout village. So we're going to roll that d8 here. And we get an 8, watchtowers. Okay, so there's only 50 people, but we have watchtowers. That's cool. Okay, I wonder, would they be at the two edges of town, the watchtowers? Does that make sense? Why don't I ask, let's ask Mythic. We'll make a fate check. Does the town of Nisme-les-Bains have watchtowers located at each end of its row layout? I'm going to say that's 50-50. 7 and 4 makes 11. That's a yes. Okay, so the watchtowers are located at either end. Is it one tower on each end? We'll call that just one tower. Yeah, nearly certain. It's probably unlikely that they'd build anymore. Yep, 8 and 5 makes 13, plus 4 is 17. Really close to our first exceptional yes, but only one tower at each end. Is there any tower in the center of the town protecting the town? I'm going to say that maybe this is unlikely, but just unlikely, not very unlikely. We get 3 and 3 is 6. Minus 1 is a 5. That's a no. And if we were playing, I'd call this a random event. Do we want to generate random events when we're not actually playing? I don't actually know that the solo sandbox system describes what to do with a random event when you're filling the sandbox with sand. So the problem for generating a random event right now is that we don't really have any characters defined or any threads defined in case those kinds of random events were rolled. We could always generate a character or assume a new character is created that is relevant to the thread. We can try it, and maybe this will seed Nisme-les-Bains with an adventure hook of some kind that might be present as the campaign begins. And if it doesn't make sense, then we can just toss it. Mythic has the I don't know rule. If it doesn't make sense, we can just throw it out. So why don't we just give it a try and see what happens? We'll roll on the random event focus table. This is a D100. We get 93 current context. Okay, so the context of Nisme-les-Bains is that it's a frontier settlement in Westmoor. It's maybe not dealing with the waters receding problem. Well, let's ask, are the waters receding in Nisme-les-Bains? Is this this water, it might be coming from the earth in a different manner than the rivers, the water coming down from the mountains. Is this settlement actually free of the water problem that other settlements are dealing with? I'm going to say that this is very likely. It's going to be a +2 modifier. We get 14, 16 yes. So this settlement is, the spring is maybe a key to why this village even exists here. Super interesting. So current context, if we look at what we have so far, the spring is really the main distinguishing factor here. There's a butcher. The butcher and the spring is really it. Otherwise, it's just a kind of a typical village. So there's not a ton of current context other than the larger setting. We know that they probably follow Ital here, being the goddess of law and war, cosmic war. So cool. So next we'll roll for a pair of words on the action meaning table and see if that action makes sense to be some kind of role-playing hook at Nisme Lebanes. So our first word, for your first word, we get 79. That is return 12. Return business. Okay, so this tells me, it's kind of an interesting detail to add. This tells me that we actually have a new business coming into Nisme Lebanes. And maybe it's in the process of being constructed. Maybe someone is planning to move to Nisme Lebanes. We don't know all the details yet. I think what we should do, though, is we should roll on, let's go back to the Sandbox Generator. Not the special locations, but the occupations, right? So, yeah, we didn't roll a 1 to find an additional occupation here, but someone wants to move here, maybe because of the springs, and bring a new occupation into Nisme Lebanes, which would make it a little more interesting as well. So this is a cool idea. So I'm going to act like we rolled a 1 for our occupations, and that we need to roll for another kind of occupation to exist here in the village. But it's not open yet. As the adventure begins, this this occupation has not quite opened yet in Nisme Lebanes. We'll roll a 1d6 to see what kind of occupation is coming to the village. And we roll a 1. It is a brewery or a vineyard. We're in hills. Does it make more sense for a vineyard to come to a hill? I think it does. So we'll say it's viticulture. We have an incoming vineyard, and that's going to take a while to get going. Or is it a brewery? I don't know. Let's ask Fate. Let's actually ask Fate, because I'm not sure. It kind of would be cool to have a brewery with the hot spring water. Someone wants to come in and use that for the water in the beer. Okay. Yeah, we'll make it. I'm actually going to ask if it's a brewery, and I'm going to make it very likely with that recent thought. Okay. Very likely it's a brewery. 7 and 5 or 7 and 8. Either way, that is 7 and 5 is, 7 and 8 is 15. Plus 2 would be 17. 7 and 5 is 12, which would be 14. Either way, it's a yes, not an exceptional yes. So we have a brewery coming to town. Cool. A butcher and a brewery. So this is a good place for people to stop and eat and drink. It's going to be a good place to stop and drink right now. It's just to eat. And the local tavern is probably excited that there's going to be a local beer being produced here in Nisme Lebanes. And having a business that's kind of incoming to the village, just kind of, it made me think of another resource. I don't know for sure if we'll use this here, but there's another book, and it targets 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, but there are some really good ideas you can lift from here and use in an OSR campaign as well. This is Home, A Light in the Darkness, and it's a resource for building up a settlement from a really small size until eventually, it can become a full-on city with enough time and effort. So, yeah, I'm not 100% sure if we'll pull this in or not, but the idea of player characters taking on goals that benefit the community, right? And that leading to progress being made in the settlement, right? So it ends up becoming like a settlement building string of adventures, which could be pretty cool. But I want to keep fleshing out the village and the sandbox, and maybe use some other resources for injecting drama before we create a character and get into what their motivations and goals will actually end up being. I think this is a pretty solid stopping point, though, for the session. We've made it through quite a bit of prep, and I'm actually having a really fun time just fleshing out the campaign setting a little more. This feels to me like an example of preparation being play. I'm having a good time. In today's session, we managed to create a religious overlay for the Westmoor campaign setting. We have Etal, the cosmic goddess of war, is how I'll say it, and Zafar, the god of goblinoids, representing law and chaos, respectively. We also learned a little more about the sinister evil lurking behind the mountains. Really just that every night there are these strange red northern lights that form behind the mountains, hinting at something demonic, something evil lurking behind its frozen peaks. And we also began generating the village of Nisme Lebanes, which very well may be our starting point, the starting point for our player character in this campaign, and which might lead to a number of adventures built around building Nisme Lebanes up and watching it grow and thrive over time. But only time will tell. And in the next session, the plan is to continue filling our sandbox. We're going to finish generating Nisme Lebanes using the Sandbox Generator, and then we'll go down any rabbit holes of curiosity that we might have about Nisme Lebanes as a setting. And then, if we feel like the time is right, maybe we'll actually get into character creation with original Dungeons & Dragons and Scarlet Heroes, which will be a fun time. If you've enjoyed today's session, don't forget to hit that like button and to subscribe for more solo role-playing content. And if that's not enough, you'll find even more solo actual plays in written format on my blog at lonelydungeoneer.blog. Thanks again for watching. I'm the Lonely Dungeoneer, and this has been Session 2 of Let's Play Chainmail Solo. Until we meet again, happy delving, and fight on!